This fake HOA cop put a gun inches from my face and told me to leave my own property. The metal was close enough that I could see my reflection warped in the slide. His arm was locked straight, hands steady, like he'd done this before, and enjoyed the feeling of control it gave him. "You're trespassing," he said. "Pack up and go." I didn't flinch. Behind him stood my house, the one I'd owned outright for years. No mortgage, no liens, no HOA signs anywhere near it. Just my land, my driveway, and the quiet I'd paid for with decades of work and discipline. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. To understand why a woman running a local HOA campaign would send an armed imposter to threaten me off land I legally owned, you need the backstory. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm a Marine. I don't announce it. I don't wear hats or bumper stickers. I did my time, served my tours, and came home wanting the one thing Marines don't get much of: peace. This house was supposed to be that. The problem started when Karen Brown decided she wanted power. She was running for HOA president in a nearby gated community. Campaign flyers, yard signs, meetings packed with promises. The issue was I didn't live in that HOA. My property sits just outside their boundary. Always has. But Karen decided boundaries were flexible when they were inconvenient. She knocked on my door one afternoon with a clipboard and a smile that felt rehearsed. She told me my property was technically included, that I owed dues, that during campaign season, my driveway would be used to host out-of-state volunteers coming in to support her run. I told her no politely. I showed her my deed, the survey, county records, everything. She didn't look at any of it. She smiled and said, "We'll handle this." 2 weeks later, letters started showing up. Notice of violation, unauthorized occupancy, pending removal, all fake, all unsigned, all threatening. I ignored them. Then this man showed up. Black vest, cheap radio, fake badge clipped to his chest that said HOA cop. Like it meant something. He walked up my driveway like he owned it, hand already resting near his waistband. He told me I had 30 minutes to vacate. I laughed once. That's when he pulled the gun. "Last warning," he said. "Karen doesn't like being told no." That was the moment everything slowed down. I noticed his stance wrong. His grip sloppy, his breathing too fast. This wasn't law enforcement. This was intimidation dressed up as authority. "You're making a serious mistake," I said. "You're armed, you're trespassing, and you're threatening a homeowner." He sneered. "You don't get it. She wants you gone." That's when I understood the real plan. They weren't trying to find me. They weren't trying to negotiate. They were trying to scare me into leaving so no one would question why campaign vans and strangers suddenly needed my land. And standing there staring down the barrel of a gun on my own driveway, I realized something else too. Karen didn't know who she'd sent him after. And he had no idea who he'd just drawn on. Because the next decision he made was going to change everything. He kept the gun up when I spoke again. Didn't blink, didn't waver. Just leaned in slightly like proximity would do the work the threat hadn't finished. 30 minutes, he repeated. "After that, I remove you." "Remove me how?" I asked calmly. That question threw him. People who play authority don't like being asked to explain it. He swallowed, adjusted his grip, and the muzzle twitched. Just a fraction, enough for me to clock it, enough to confirm what I already knew. "You're resisting a lawful order," he said. "This is your last chance." I exhaled slowly through my nose. "You are not law enforcement," I said. "You're standing on private property with a firearm threatening a homeowner. That's felony territory." His jaw tightened. Behind him, a black SUV idled at the curb. No plates on the front, windows tinted too dark. Campaign flyers stacked on the passenger seat. Karen's smiling face staring back at me through the glass. So this was the plan. Use my land as a staging area. Park volunteers. Store equipment. Control access. And if I didn't cooperate, intimidate, escalate, push until I folded. He stepped closer. The barrel brushed my cheek. I shifted my weight, turned my shoulder slightly, and slapped the slide sideways with the heel of my hand hard. The gun went offline just as his finger tightened. The shot cracked past my ear and buried itself somewhere behind me. Before he could process what happened, I was inside his reach. I drove my forearm into his throat, crushing the words out of him. His grip loosened. I wrenched the gun free and kicked his knee sideways. It folded with a sharp pop, and he went down screaming. I stepped back, weapon trained on him now. "Hands on the ground," I ordered. "Do not move." He didn't listen. He reached for his waistband. That was the second mistake. I struck him across the face with a grip once, clean, controlled, enough to end the fight without ending his life. He went limp, collapsing face first onto my driveway. Silence rushed in. My heart was steady, my breathing even. Years of training don't vanish just because the setting looks suburban. Neighbors were already outside, phones up, mouths open. Someone shouted that they'd called the police. Another yelled my name like we were friends who'd never spoken before. I set the gun down carefully, kicked it away, stepped back with my hands visible. The man on the ground groaned, blood trickling from his nose, one eye already swelling shut. From the SUV, the engine revved. Then it sped off. Karen wasn't sticking around. I looked down at the fake cop at the vest, the badge, the shattered confidence. Sirens wailed in the distance, and as they grew louder, one thing became painfully clear to everyone watching. This wasn't a campaign dispute anymore. It was an armed impersonation, an attempted forced eviction, and a woman's ambition collapsing under the weight of her own lies. And when the police arrived, they were going to want names. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe because the story is only going to get better. The first cruiser rolled in fast, tires crunching against the gravel at the edge of my driveway. Then another lights washed the front of my house, red and blue, cutting through the afternoon, calm like a knife. I stayed exactly where I was, hands open, palms out, calm. The officer stepped out with his hand resting near his holster, eyes moving from me to the man on the ground to the black vest that read HO Cop. "What happened here?" he asked. "I was threatened at gunpoint on my own property," I said evenly. "I defended myself. The firearm is on the ground, unloaded. That man is not law enforcement." I nodded toward the fake cop. Another officer moved in, kicking the weapon farther away, cuffing the man on the ground, while a third checked his pulse and radioed for EMS. The fake cop tried to speak, just a wet groan and a string of half-formed excuses, but no one was listening to him anymore. The first officer turned back to me. "Sir, I need your ID." I reached slowly into my pocket and handed it over. He looked at the name, then the address, then back at the house behind me. "This is your property?" he asked. "Yes." "No HOA?" "None. Never has been." He handed my ID to another officer who walked it back to the cruiser to run it. In the meantime, neighbors gathered closer, phones still recording, whispers turning into statements. The officer who first spoken to me lowered his voice. "You military Marine?" I said. He nodded once. Not impressed, not intimidated, just understanding the posture, the calm, the way I hadn't moved an inch since they arrived. EMS pulled in moments later. As they loaded the fake cop onto a stretcher, one of the medics shook his head. "Fracturado orbital, crushed knee, concussion." Lucky to be breathing. Lucky. The word hung there. An officer approached me again, notebook in hand. "Sir, we're going to need a full statement." "You'll get it," I said, along with copies of my deed, the survey, and the fake notices that started this. That got his attention. I watched as another officer opened the vest pouch on the stretcher and pulled out a cheap badge, a prepaid phone, and a folded piece of paper. Campaign instructions, names, addresses. Karen Brown's name appeared more than once. The officer's jaw tightened. From down the street, someone shouted that they'd found more flyers dumped behind a fence. Another neighbor mentioned late-night meetings, vans, cash exchanges. The picture was coming together fast. By the time the fake cop was driven away, the officers weren't asking if a crime had been committed anymore. They were asking how many. One of them pulled me aside before leaving. "Mr. Walker," he said, You're not under arrest. This looks like clear self-defense against an armed impersonator. We'll be in touch. I nodded. As the cruisers pulled away, the neighborhood slowly exhaled. Phones lowered. Whispers faded. People drifted back to their homes, carrying a story they'd be telling for years. I stood alone on my driveway, my house still standing behind me. Karen wanted land. She wanted power. She wanted obedience. What she got instead was an investigation, a trail of evidence. And a man she sent to do her dirty work facing charges that don't disappear with campaign signs. And that's how a woman who thought boundaries were flexible learned something permanent. You don't threaten a Marine on his own property. Especially not with a lie, a fake badge, and a gun you have no right to carry. Because when the truth shows up with sirens and paperwork, it doesn't negotiate. The end.